Hey there, it's Alex. Welcome to Quick Connect. I have with me Ethan from Undelusional, and today we're just going to talk a little bit about revolutionary remote working. So with COVID now, all of us are pretty much stuck at home, and some of us are new to remote working. We thought we'll spend a bit of time just having a chat around remote work, how to make it work for you, and we'll see where this goes.
Yes.
Okay, so Ethan, do you remote work?
I used to. So a little bit of background. I've been running my business for the last 8 years. Own businesses for the last 8 years. So the most important part of remote working, which is called self-discipline, has been a part of me, whether or not I wanted it to be. Because when you're working in your own business, the failure or the success is completely on your shoulders. So the good and bad thing about being at home is that you can work from home as a business owner. You can work from home anytime, anywhere because you're not reporting to anybody. But it also comes into the big question as to whether you want to actually work at home, whether you should be working at home, a whole bunch of questions. So that's so a lot of for me. I spent a lot of time on my bed working through the years. So I've spent full days where I've been working on my bed because I refuse to get out. But more importantly, remote working, I literally spent one whole year working from a cafe. So
okay, so I guess the image of you working on your bed is exactly what employers don't want and what bosses are worried about. So
why?
I would think so. So as we start talking about remote working, I had a few broad categories I thought we could chat about today that helps people to make it work for them. So the first one that I had on my list was about the workspace, right? How do we create a workspace that allows remote working to work for us? And for me, I had a couple of things that I thought would make it useful for people. The first one is about having a dedicated space, right? So some people, because they have not worked at home before, they don't actually have a workspace at home. And if you actually do have a dedicated workspace at home with the things set up, probably you might need to have some private time, lock the door if you need that space for 1-2 hours span at least, especially if you're home, family might need attention. So you do need dedicated space, and ability to lock the door, remove distractions would be good. And the other piece I have is about the environment, right? So once you create this dedicated workspace for remote work, it's about having an environment that is conducive for you. If you have ergonomic chairs, right, that you're comfortable sitting, you don't get back pain after that, and you need to sit for long periods of time. Making sure that you got good air quality, maybe put some scent, aroma therapy, diffuser things. In some cases, when I work on my own, I like to have some background sound. I play music at the back, just instrumental music that helps me get into the focus mood. And if you can, small plants would work. For me, I used to have this little air plant, but it died. So I don't have green fingers. Every plant that comes through my hand dies. But if it works for you, having a plant on your table,
Bad mojo.
Add on. Right? What?
Bad mojo.
Yeah, bad mojo when it comes to plants. So that's the first piece I have. It's really about the workspace, creating that workspace, and then making it conducive for you. Ethan, how about you? How do you create the workspace for you to work well remotely?
I think I'm slightly different. I'm basically based on routine or based on project or work. The moment I know I have a task at hand, give me a bed, a table, I'll just use my laptop and I'll go. I think the hardest part, okay, so this round, I think...
Internet is breaking up.
Okay, so let me repeat again, okay? So for me, remote working is all about the routine or the goals. The moment you know you have a deadline or you have something to work on, it's not whether is it discipline or not, it's just you have to get it done, you get it done. And that's what I've noticed. For me, a lot of it has been based off the need to work, the need to figure out certain things or spending time on things. So right now, I'm working from my desk that I haven't used for the last 6 years. The only reason why I'm using this desk right now is because I needed the privacy. I used to work downstairs in the dining table where there's a massive amount of space. If by my preference, I should have a massive table where I can display all the random things I have, and then put a laptop in the middle of all of that and use it. But I don't have that luxury. So not everybody has a luxury of having their own room, their own space, the ability to have their own table. There's a reason why everybody ran for IKEA tables just before the lockdown. Or circuit breaker, sorry, not lockdown, okay? Hashtag not lockdown, okay? Right, most important thing here is it is just before the circuit breaker, everybody was rushing to get tables because most people don't have the equipment at home.
We never thought about it. I was just wondering why they're trying to infect themselves. So yeah, once we have the table and making sure that we have that space is useful. And I thought another thing was interesting is that we are quite different in the space that we want to create. And a lot of it boils down to maybe our temperaments and in some cases, maybe even our own strengths or talent teams, right? What do we need? So you have, I don't know, you have adaptability somewhere?
Yeah, adaptability is definitely one of my top 10, top 12, sorry. Yeah.
Top 12. So for you, you're quite okay. You can move in different spaces. In fact, you probably enjoy moving from your bed to your table to a cafe. I mean, now you can go cafes, but you probably enjoy different spaces because adaptability requires that difference. For me, adaptability isn't that high. I have focus in my top 12, right? Strategic, and I have empathy, individualization, which requires me to, talk and connect to people. So that's important for remote work for me. Can talk a little bit more about that later. But I guess we need to be clear about what kind of workspaces work for us, also depending on our own temperaments, our own talents, our own needs. And that's an important point to remember.
Yeah, I think for me, what's really interesting is that you're talking about this, right? So adaptability is definitely high for me. One of my biggest struggles is wondering why I like confined spaces when I like to work. So I like small, cozy. Actually, ideally, my room would be completely dark right now if I'm not doing the teleconferencing. And it seems to be the best time for me to work. I don't like having too much light when I want to work. So that's why I like in bed with the curtains down, whole room dark was my ideal.
Nice, interesting. So that helps you to focus, right?
100% focus.
Distractions. Cool. Okay, the next thing that, or rather the next broad topic that I had in mind as we talked about it was about what are some of the things that we need to look at personally, right? And I've got a few buckets for that one. First one was about mindset. As we start to do remote working, for some of us, it's new. So what are some mindsets that we need to have as we approach this change? So the first one I had was about giving it time. It is a change in terms of the way that we work, the processes, the routines that we have. So we need to give it time. The second thing is that with all changes, there's discomfort. So expect discomfort. We will get through it. But once you spend enough time through it, you get more comfortable with it. And the last one I just added in because you spoke about it, it's about self-discipline, right? How do you have that self-discipline to sit down and get work done, even though you're remote? Again, it ties back to environment, ties back to limiting distractions as much as possible. So those were kind of the three things I had for mindset. For Ethan, what do you think in terms of mindset?
Again, I go back to the concept of routine. I think a lot of people are used to going to the office, used to having the travel time. Part of me was laughing when I was recognizing that the travel time was so useful for me to play my games, to do some readings, to go on, do my audiobooks and everything. It's like, hey, suddenly it's gone. But the good part is in exchange you get more sleep time. You get more time that is completely like you're allowed to do nothing.
Right. So that's a beautiful segue, right? Because the next topic that I had was about self-care, right? So once you change your routine, you have no time for yourself, and therefore self-care becomes an important part of remote working, right? In the past, we had downtime traveling from one place to another. You could travel, you could read. But right now, because we are doing remotely, everything is virtual, you could have very tightly packed schedules. So one of the things that was important as I thought about it was about work life. So what are some boundaries that you draw between work and life? With remote working, sometimes people lose track of day and night. You can't kind of pick up. I mean, you could pick up. I'll talk about routines later, right? So about how do you start and end a day for routines. But then we need boundaries in terms of time for our work and life. Or in some cases, people are looking for integration and balance, right? How do I take time off if especially I have a small kid to take care of? And they need to balance the two as we start to integrate. And it's very important to make sure that we have work-life either balance or integration there. And of course, at the same time, we need to have scheduled breaks. For some of us, our schedules are so packed that there's no rest. So in your schedules, it might help to tuck in a half an hour slot for a break during the day so that you have a breather. And those are all important things that will help us to have some self-care as we do remote work.
I think, let me extend a bit more. I think, so let me share a bit more. So I'm used to working nonstop. So functioning as a business owner, you will be used to working nonstop if you know that you have a next project. So right now, I am on the next project and I'm like working my bottom half of. I cannot say too nice words here. Okay. All right. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been working really, really hard. So when this circuit breaker came on, it was kind of a shock. And the inability to go into office was a huge deal because pulling my team together. So this is also as a manager and as a leader, pulling my team together became a lot harder. I'm usually the person holding the energy and the space to make sure that everybody else is working because we work in a co-working space. I basically make sure that everybody is kind of informed, put along the path. What I recognize is that the difficulty of managing this now is that because one of my guys, he literally burns out at home. Like he has issues even working at home. So managing his self-care, right. Actually even extending over to like making sure that he wakes up on time, like this morning, me. Right. And then what happens was like how is he doing? Making sure that he's feeling all right. I think for me, it was also kind of shocking for me myself when I started switching back to remote working because I can, but having to do so rather than having it as a choice is very different, right? So when you make it as a choice, you can laze in bed, you know how long you have and everything. You still make it down to the office, maybe. There's all these kind of things that are available. But the difference now is that there's no other choice. And I think that traps a lot of people. That's when you need to recognize that you can allow yourself to feel terrible. I spent the good second day figuring out my emotions. Because I was recognizing that I had some rubs with my team that personally I was starting to feel quite strongly. Because the moment you're remote, you'll start recognizing things that you don't get to see when you're still running, right? So there is a lot of that happening, and a lot of my friends have that happening. So it's a lot about how do you manage these two feelings at the same time, and then how do you actually allow yourself to experience these certain things. That's why having breaks and making sure that you are not working 24/7 is really important, because remote working is not an excuse to keep working.
Right, definitely. And you make a very good point, right? I think there's a difference between someone who is a manager and someone who is not. So as an individual, it's important for you to look at your own self-care. But as a manager, then you're looking at your own self-care and the self-care, or rather the engagement and the mental health of your team, right? And what can you do about it would be an entirely different ballgame. Right, so if you can help them to then draw the boundaries, help them to take breaks and things like that, it would probably do them a lot of good, do your team a lot of good.
Yeah, a lot of it is just check-ins as well. The proper check-ins, the proper sense of care. Like in Singapore, we're very used to this concept of FaceTime, which is showing up for the boss. Maybe letting people not have FaceTime. Maybe letting people just be.
It's like trusting them that they will do the work on their own. I mean, that's a huge piece for a manager, right? The trust in allowing them to go and get their own things done and just be comfortable with it. In fact, there's this entire topic that I thought is important. Whether you do remote work or not, that should be the expectation, the norm. It's kind of a mindset thing.
Yeah, control freaks.
Which you can talk about in your program. The other piece that was important for the personal side in remote working is the social aspects. Now that we are in circuit breaker in Singapore, really not supposed to leave the house unless you're going for essential services, buying food, groceries, or things like that. And it's two important things that we could probably have. One is to have a remote community. So how do we remain connected with people, even though right now, because of it, we kind of circuit breaking. So we need to have a remote community to go into that. And then the other thing is be purposeful about communicating with other people, right? So when we are away from people, sometimes we feel isolated, disconnected, but we don't do anything about it. So if we are purposeful about communicating with people, pick up the phone, text someone, call someone, tell them that you'd like to catch up and have a Zoom call, right? So that you don't end up being isolated with people. And that kind of purposeful communication helps you to meet those social needs that every one of us have during this season.
Yeah, how would you define a person's social need? A lot of people don't know what their social needs are.
Okay, so my top two strengths are empathy, individualization, right? So relator is also part of my top 12. So I recognize that I kind of need to speak to people, right? Like what we're doing now, and get to know what's happening, what's going on in their lives, talk about sometimes even random stuff, and just have a connection with people. Of course, face to face is definitely better, right? There's the physical touch thing that we can never do virtually, but at least we have the visual audio at some point. That for me, it's kind of a social need to still have communication, conversations, and being connected with people. So for me, that's social need based on my talent teams. There are some people who have other talent teams, right? So maybe they have deliberative and intellection, and their need for social interaction is a lot lesser. In some cases, just call them introverts. And to them, it's like, yay, I don't need to talk to people anymore. I can have my space, and they love it, right? So I guess knowing what your needs are for the introverts, you can enjoy more personal time. But for those rest of us who do need more interaction with people, be much more purposeful and conscious that needs to be done. Go meet those needs and not let it bring you under.
What I can completely agree here is I try to get people to understand what it means to have a conversation with another person very often, because when we talk about like the need to communicate with other people, right? The question is why. How many of us have spend a lot of time on small talk and just hang out and have conversations that last for hours on end, but with no purpose in mind. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna share something I shared quite a while back with a workshop that I was doing previously.
Sure.
So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, a lot of people talk about it as satisfier style. So they talk about physiological needs at the bottom, right? Which is where you feel that you need to have certain things that satisfy you. They say food, water, shelter, all these kind of different things that are needed for people to feel like they are satisfied. So what's really interesting here is babies die if they don't get touched for a week or two. Like if they're born and nobody physically touches them, they will die. Like this is has been proven a number of times over in rather inhumane experiments during the post-World War era, but it was used as a very good counterpoint to what most people believe is what's really important. Intimacy, which is actually sometimes even physical touch for a lot of people. It's a very major part of the relationships that people need to have. And then the other part about this is also like whether you have actual emotional intimacy with somebody is a different story altogether. This is why I wanted to switch over here. Because actually on this level, right, a lot of people are used to getting it through very not direct methods. Hanging out with a person for hours on end is not a direct way of getting intimacy. Being purposeful with the connection that you're developing with people. Being very clear as to why you want the conversation to happen. Like, I'm feeling insecure, I don't know what to do for today, is a very good way of starting an intimate conversation rather than, hey, can I just catch up with you? The way that we talk, the way that we converse with other people will drastically change if we want to look for certain things. And so I'll go back to like purposeful communication, right? So some people have greater intimacy with their books than they have with their with other people. That's perfectly fine. But when you need somebody to listen, to share, to bounce ideas off, know that there are other people. Okay, all the introverts I know, if they find the right people to talk to, they can talk for years.
Right.
So it's really about the intimacy element, right? It's really about taking care of your body, taking care of your physical element, the intimacy element, to make sure that you feel all right through this period. A lot of introverts that I know actually just don't like most people. That's the real reason why they're introverts, not because they don't want intimacy or they don't need other people. So this is where I think it's really important that we note that intimacy is a very large part of our lives, and calling people up and having good conversations, being very purposeful about good conversations, extending from what you were talking about, right? Like, how are we going to discuss this? Like, is this something that I need right now emotionally? And these are the questions that we need to ask.
Interesting. So maybe I get a sense that we could probably have a conversation on this as an entire topic, right? How
Yes.
do we have proper conversations with one another? And that could be our next quick connect.
Yeah, sure.
One of the other things, so this is going to be a slightly longer call. One of the other things I thought was important in terms of remote working is the ability to have some self-reward for ourselves, right? So
yeah.
things that we want to do, predetermine what you want to reward yourself for this change in remote working, in things that you're accomplishing, and then of course following through with that reward. And I thought that from personal perspective, the ability to have that self-reward to motivate yourself is another useful thing to have while we do remote work in this current climate.
For me, what do I reward myself with? As in, I think one thing, because I've learned it from Tony Robbins actually, he talked about the celebration dance. So everybody has their own celebration dance. Every time I complete something, I'm like,
could you do your celebration dance in front of the camera for everyone?
If either this, like yeah, or like yeah. So it's either of this two, right? So every time I'm done with something, I'm like, yes, I'm done. Okay, good. And that within itself triggers a reward center reaction in my head.
Right. Okay. So for you, your reward center is kind of anchored to a particular physiology, a dance. Like I know some people do the dabbing, right? And then it's like when they win something. So this interesting point. Maybe we should all create a anchor for ourselves, right? Celebratory dance whenever we do something well. It's like there's this baby photo. I'm sure most of you have seen it. So I think that could be a useful thing in terms of the self-reward piece, right, for ourselves.
Yeah. And then let me extend a bit more. Self-reward, please don't put junk food as self-reward.
Ice cream!
Yeah, no, you can do it at the end of the day, but you cannot put it as every small reward. Like, when we talk about small rewards, okay, ice cream is a big reward to me. Small reward is 10 minutes of game time on the phone. Small little things that do not bring you too far away from reality. That does not take away too much from what you're doing. Because you want to trigger the reward center regularly, but not intensely. And then you also don't want to run out of ice cream within a short period of time. So you should leave it as a big reward.
And you don't want to get too fat.
Not everybody cares, but yeah.
That's for me. Okay, the other large chunk that I'd like to talk about is about how do we be effective in our work remotely, right? I mean, end of the day, remote work is work. So how do we be effective? The first one I have on my list is about technology, right? When you're face to face, you can talk, you can use pen, paper, and things like that. But technology then becomes a very big piece of remote work. First and foremost, you need Wi-Fi, and I think it's quite well, we assume that most people have Wi-Fi, but some of us don't actually have stable Wi-Fi at home, or some of us don't even have Wi-Fi because we're working somewhere else or staying with someone else in this season. So Wi-Fi, very, very important. Make sure that you have the necessary infrastructure for that. The next thing that is important is collaborative tools, right? So how do we collaborate with one another? So right now, Ethan, you and I are on Zoom. That helps us to talk. So we need some form of teleconferencing. We could have different ways of sharing files, documents, whiteboarding. So some people use things like Slack, Padlet, chat folders, real-time whiteboards and things like that. So that generally make sure you have the necessary technology that helps you to collaborate and communicate with people. If not, remote work will be very challenging.
I know that there was a surge of people buying the little Wacom tablets.
What tablets?
Wacom tablets. Wacom is like the one that all the artists use and the designers use to start drawing. A lot of my friends started buying Wacom tablets. There was some massive discount. Okay, not massive, but like quite big discounts given by Popular during the just before the lockdown. Circuit breaker. Yeah. So, so it's I'm pretty sure it's still available online. If you're trying to start drawing out for people, it's a very good tool. I think in a lot of collaborative conversations, my biggest struggle with people has always been, and so I think for me it's okay because I know how to communicate. I know what work I need to do before I share with people. So my team works off Notion. We've used everything from Asana to Trello to everything to try to do the task management.
Yep.
So the good thing about Notion for us is that we can plug in almost anything onto there. So it's a one-stop shop for everything. So we can. It's almost like a digital server / task manager. So that's the good part. That's what we focus on. We actually just chuck in all the information on there and really start sharing information. The hard part here is that your information has to be organized before you share. So this is what the real tough part of remote working. You cannot give half-baked ideas along the way. You have to formalize and formulate. So this is where it's interesting, right? So a lot of people are used to giving half-baked ideas within the workplace so that we start the conversation going. But now it's very hard for the other person to understand what you're going through because this is the only way we communicate. When we have meetings, like all the cameras all over the place, you're not going to have a very intimate session with a person to understand your thoughts.
Right.
So this is where being very clear about your ideas, and this forces you to learn how to be clear. And another conversation that I've had which was really funny. So I've been, so Alex, that I've been on a project on dealing with office politics, and we're laughing. And a friend and I were talking about, would office politics get worse or better through this period?
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Starting to see it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's another topic we can go into, office politics, right?
Yeah.
I think that what you talk about, the half-baked ideas and how do we collaborate, also depends on the medium and platform that we use to communicate. So, I mean, Zoom does help for us to, video conferencing does help for us to share half-baked ideas and formalize them. I've been working around with collaborative whiteboards, remote whiteboards recently. I thought that was, again, a very interesting way for us to discuss and, not formalize, but make more concrete ideas that are not quite fully formed yet, right? So you could throw different pieces in, you could move, post pictures around, you can reorganize them, you can regroup them, you can draw arrows. And I thought it's pretty new to me, but as I started to use it, I thought, hey, that's a fantastic way for us to collaborate and form ideas and discuss and talk about things. So I think it's still possible in terms of how do we then discuss half-baked ideas rather than having everything fully formed. And I think for those of us who have ideation, for me, ideation number 6. For those of us who... Number 2, right? Okay, so I think we need the space to talk about half-baked ideas, because if the expectation for people of ideation is to have ideas fully formed, that's very challenging, right? We need to toss out new things and new ideas with people. We need to tussle, and we need a medium and form to do that. So the collaborative tools then becomes very important for us with ideation to be able to do that and to organize and structure.
I think I'm actually interested to see the collaborative whiteboard thing. I mean, I use whiteboard all the time in the office. Like, if there's anything I miss right now, it is the whiteboard.
See? Okay, so let's, after this call, we're going to try the whiteboard and see how that works.
Cool.
The next item I had, which we have already touched on a little bit for work effectiveness, is to have a routine, specifically a starting and ending routine. So historically, what some people used to do when they work from home is they have a starting routine. They wake up, they go shower, they have breakfast, they go change, they go downstairs, they walk around their block, come back home, walk straight to their work room or dedicated workspace, and they start working. So it's kind of a routine that gets people into that mindset that, oh, okay, this is the start of work. So whatever it is that a person has, a routine then helps us to mark, at least mentally, the start and end of the day. So a routine for starting, and of course a routine for ending. Whatever that routine of ending could be. It could be the self-reward thing. It could be the victory dance that you spoke about. It's like, yes, at the end of the day. So routines, important for you to increase your effectiveness at work.
Yeah. I think, what do I do? We can do the magical thing like our dear PM did, right? Like drink water and then suddenly
and speak multiple languages.
Yeah, I think more importantly, in my experience, again, remote working is normal for me. The routine has always been actually people. If not for the call this morning, I would probably be spending more time getting ready to start work.
Lost you there for a while.
I would probably be staying in a little bit more and reading a couple of books before I start work. So I would have baked a bit more. So a large part of this is also even setting up time to meet people. In fact, that's even how I get things going. Like being in office early has always been one of the means I get productive early. But I think one of the major parts here is the ability to have people to meet changes your schedule and routine completely. You can start the morning with a call. You can start the morning with a huddle, with a certain thing. Right. So you can still do all the morning rituals, but you know that you have to be there because you're accountable to other people.
Right. So for you, maybe the routine then of starting is maybe a morning huddle whereby you're accountable. So accountability pulls you in to make sure that you start.
Yeah. And that counts for a lot for people who don't need routine in their lives, like me.
I'm just going to write that down. Morning huddle. Useful. Okay. The other piece now, I thought that this was interesting for me, right? As we started to work, who's the person who wrote? I think it was Timothy Galway who wrote The Inner Game of Work. And he shared these 3 things that we need to have, 3 elements in our goals. He said, for everything that we do, we need to have performance goals, enjoyment goals, and learning goals. And most of us are very much focused on performance goal, the work that I need to complete, the task I need to complete. The other 2 elements, I thought, look, now that we kind of isolated and things like that, if we added those elements to every goal and every task that we had, it would make a difference to our well-being. It will make a difference to our efficiency. So for everything that we do, make sure that there's performance goal, what kind of task you want to complete. What's the enjoyment goal? Enjoyment goal could be as simple as, enjoying a good cup of coffee, right? Or hot chocolate or whatever it is. A learning goal would be whatever it is that you want to learn or take away from that work. And just having that model in mind, performance, enjoyment, and learning, PL, would be probably useful for us in making ourselves more effective and efficient.
That's cool. I think so. I think a major thing that I was discussing. So I realized yesterday I have no self-care
Right.
in general, like in most sense of the things, because I'm quite an adjustable person. I don't have much of a routine, and I'm easily rewarded with, right? So one of the funniest things was a discussion yesterday. So for me, self-care has always been being in the process of building. In the process of building, like, so building a project, building
Right.
a new thing. Right now, learning new things. Like, for example, this morning, after this call, I'll be going on Canva and setting up new images that I've never done before. So this excites me. These are the things that reward me tremendously, because I know I can do it somewhat, but I've never done it before. So trying it was a very important part for me. The journey is very much okay. So people who are numbers driven. So this is something that I think applies to most people on this call. On this, who's going to listen to this? People who are numbers driven, which is the most common way of looking at things, tend to be unable to separate performance and goals.
Okay.
So this is where I think is really important, right? So for me, is performance, I can do the best in the world, but I might not hit my goals.
Right.
Because there are a lot of things that are beyond our control.
Right.
So this is where remote working is all about lack of control.
True.
So, yeah, because you can't directly control people. I think at the same breath, I realize that our government can't control people. They realize they can't control people, because that's why they're putting more measures every single day to try to control people.
Right.
But the truth is, you will have a lack of control. There are most things that you can't control. Other people's behaviors. Whether your client or your customer is going to enjoy this. Whether the thing is going to see through itself. Because if you're not running the execution, you can't ensure certain things. Okay, so it's very important that we recognize all this. Most important part here is the performance side of things, to me. If you are not focusing on the performance as you're doing the work, you're not focusing on just being there and doing the work itself and always thinking elsewhere, you're not going to be able to stay focused in remote working.
Right.
And that is a major part of the process. It's almost like a practice. How do musicians practice 8 hours a day? They focus on the process, not the performance of the practice itself, not the goal of being able to play the piece. They focus bit by bit by bit by bit. It is the very nature of hard practice that is really difficult for most people to grasp once they're used to the workplace. But at home, it's all about honing down on every single element and making it as good as you can. And that process is self-fulfilling you. Which is why I talk about the self-reward afterwards, because every time I finish one bit, I'll be like, okay, done. I don't have to worry about it for the next 5 minutes. I can throw it aside and focus on something else. And because I can allow myself to perform, not get to the goal, but to perform.
So the way that I categorize those two goals is you have a outcome goal and you have a process goal. Right? So the performance is the process goal, right? What do you need to do to get there? And then the outcome is, well, the final goal that you want to achieve. So that's interesting. So I'm just going to take that down. That, hey, look, actually, if we focus on the process, it will help us to get back to the outcome much better.
I just watched this movie called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
That was a book.
Yeah, it was a book as well. Yeah, so it reminded me of the process.
Interesting. Okay, I have one final item. Then you can see if there's anything else that we missed out. What are some guidelines that would help us to increase our work effectiveness? There are two things that I'd like to talk about. The first one is about communication. That when we communicate, we need to over-communicate one another, because it's a bit different when you're remote versus when you're face-to-face. when you do communicate with people, it's useful to use some small talk, social, to engage people socially before you dive straight into the work, which many people tend to do, but I tend to do too. So learn to connect socially, emotionally with people when you can, and then use videos where possible, right? So you don't already see people. Some of us are very cautious to, I don't know, maybe, I mean, if you just got out of the shower and you've got nothing around you but the bathrobe, then yes, please don't use video. But if you're ready, videos are always good to have that connection. The other thing about guidelines was about having check-ins. You mentioned that, right? So some of us actually need regular check-ins with our managers, or in some cases, our team members. I would recommend that it's pre-scheduled, right? So maybe have it once a week, or like what you mentioned earlier, maybe it's a routine for morning huddles for people. But if you have regular check-ins as a general guideline, it does also help you increase your work effectiveness.
It's true. I think we have to recognize that the huddles are not too eagle eye on you. It's the huddles have to be flexible, yet at the same time accountable. I don't know how to describe this. I think one of the hardest things that most people will experience throughout this remote working period is okay, again, we go back to the concept of FaceTime. We go back to the concept of lip service. And we go back to the concept of office politics for that same reason, right? Because the conversation with that friend was also that people who have not been doing the work but have been taking credit from others are going to start to be kind of exposed during this period, especially if the people in the doing the remote work started sharing and sending the emails themselves, started sharing it with the group and using the video conferencing thing to talk about what they're doing. I think it's very important that during this time that everybody starts taking a little bit more ownership of their work. Yeah, because I think so. When we're talking about this, the check-ins, the routines, the different elements to make sure that your remote working experience is great, goes back to all this certain patterns. Okay, I think this is also why I need to extend it to please do not adopt new technology in the middle of remote working. Like, stick by one. If it really, really is difficult, then maybe switch over. But I've the number of people I have a friend who has been sharing on her Facebook about helping her family, her mom, with her Office VPN, virtual private network.
Right.
And because apparently the instructions of the IT department was a little bit off, just a couple of things off. So she helped rewrite the whole thing. Next moment, she did it for the whole department.
They should pay.
She's not being paid. So she was like, can I bill the company? That's exactly it, right? So you can imagine that if this was done about 4 or 5 times, there's new technology to be adopted, there's all these different things. This is a struggle. This is going to be a tough struggle period.
Yep. Especially for organizations that aren't already, like we talked about technology, right? Organizations that don't already have the technology that supports remote working, that now they are scrambling for technology to ensure that that can be done. Unfortunately, because of the nature of our situation right now, of the pandemic, they don't really have a lot of time to adopt it, but yet they are forced to change. So there's this joke, right? Who led the technology transformation in your organization? Your CEO, and COVID-19. And there's a big circle around COVID-19. So it's quite interesting, right? That because of the pandemic itself, it forced many organizations to have digital transformation. It's just that because they weren't prepared for it, the transformation itself would have been very painful.
The culture itself was the biggest issue. And we were talking about, like, again, goes back to FaceTime, goes back to accountability. With digital, it's a lot easier to be accountable. You can track changes. One thing I love about Google Sheets and even if you're using Microsoft Word now, and like you can even track changes, who made the change, who made what comment, who's just talking bullshit, like This creates a lot of things. Having a sense of, I think this is where knowing your working style is super, super important during this time. Knowing your working style, knowing how you prefer to work, knowing what you want, how you want to get through to the end of the day
Right.
is very essential. And what I've been seeing, at least within my peers, is that a lot of people are virtually not working. A lot of gaming is happening, thankfully, for them. I don't,
Self-care.
I don't see that happening for me. But there is a lot of elements where people are starting to enjoy this thing. There was also a GIF that was like, if I have to wake up early in the morning to get to work, 6 a.m., 6:30, I need to get up, go out, and then just brush teeth, go da 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 da. Then go all the way out, take the MRT, go all the way down to work, da 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 da. Compared to if I was working from home, right? So working from home, 15 minutes before the work starts, wake up, brush teeth, change clothes, go to desk, okay, start work. It is true. That is true. But it requires a massive amount of discipline for you to do that.
Right.
It requires accountability. It requires a lot of this. Today, more than ever, and this is more than ever before, we need to be a lot more accountable to ourselves. Also, we're talking about cabin fever as well, right? A lot of people cannot be stuck at home. I have the fortune of living in a space where it is large enough for me to move up and down, left, right, center. Not everybody has that. You are lucky enough for you to have your space and an own room.
Right.
Well, it's not lucky. It's fortunate. Okay, not the word lucky. Not everybody has that space. How do you carve out the niche? How do you do that? That's really where it's hard to be accountable, but it is part of the process during this pandemic period.
Yeah, and it's challenging, right? So currently all the schools are shut down. Everything is home-based learning. So I've had friends who have like 3 kids.
Yeah.
And they're trying to do work with the kids next to them, and the kids were like, "Mom, can you help me with this? Mom, what is this? Mom, what is that? Oh, Dad, I want this. Dad, I want that." So it becomes a lot more challenging. That's why I said, hey, if we can have a dedicated space, I know of people who will lock themselves in the storeroom or something just so that they can have time to do certain things when they work from home. But the accountability piece becomes really important, and we all need to figure out how to get work done amidst this environment, especially when you have a number of young kids all doing home-based learning at home, right? So challenge that we all face.
I would like to just add in, one of the biggest things is that a lot of things you don't need to think about it full time. Like certain work, you don't have to think about it full time. You need to sit down and write it down afterwards, but you don't have to think about it full time. Meaning, I can play with my kids, I can do certain things, and then come back to work. So it's all about creating boundaries even with your kids.
Yeah. And
so
that would be very useful.
That's a parenting tip which I'm not going to go down because I don't have kids. But I've dealt with enough kids to know how to draw boundaries with them, thankfully. But it is really a large part of the process of being able to work from home.
Cool. So thank you very much, Ethan. I think we pretty much covered a lot of ground on remote working. Covered everything from what's the workspace, what do we do for ourselves personally, how do we work more effectively, technology, routines, goals, kind of guidelines we have. So I think that with this, we can probably make remote work a little bit more effective for ourselves. Probably some tips that we can take away. Most importantly is to recognize that remote work is different from it's different for every person depending on temperament, your strengths, your talents, and things like that. And it's important to have that self-awareness on how.
And also your environment.
Yeah, in your environment. So perhaps the next round we can have a little bit of conversation around quality of conversations that you spoke of a little bit, and maybe even things like office politics and remote working.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun topic. Yes.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks everyone for joining us for this session. It's a lot longer than what we thought it would be, but again, a lot of content. I'll share with you some of I did a mind map for this, right? So I'll share a little bit on this if you're keen. And yeah, that's it for today's Quick Connect. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Not very quick, but yeah.
Bye, guys.